Bam! MC is in the house. What is going on, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. So I'm here every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, and I'm going to give folks a moment to join. We should all be used to the rules by now. Do me a favor, if you are watching on one of the platforms from which I am streaming, please let me know. Leave a comment and let me know that you are there. All right, Jesse, what's up, my man? Coming in from YouTube. Corey, what's up, brother, man? 30 episodes. That's right. Today is number 30. Johnny Groove in the house. Bam. What's going on, brother, man? All right. What's up, Joe? All right. So YouTube is in the house. Let's see if anybody's watching from Facebook. And I started streaming. What's up, Derek? I started streaming from Twitter also. And I haven't, I never invested any time in Twitter, to be honest. For a while, what I did was I was using, a bunch of social media management softwares, and they had the option of, pretty much like this gives you the option of posting to Twitter also by putting the account in. So really indirectly, I've invested in Twitter. But now that Elon's taken over, I am cautiously optimistic that it might be a platform that I could actually invest some time in developing. I'm not somebody that plays the Twitter game very well, admittedly. But I will also say that's because I just haven't really invested time in playing it. I'm not somebody that, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I'm not addicted to social media. I'm not somebody that, only has social media as an outlet, to pursue the things that I'm doing individually. But that being said, I do enjoy putting content out there, right? So, all right, we got a pretty decent group now. Housekeeping, masterchim.com. That is the Master Chim letter opt-in form, right? So you go to masterchim.com, you can sign up for my free email newsletter. I write one every day. Some are longer than others. Sometimes I talk about events. Sometimes, like I made an announcement today for this video, but there's always a quote of the day. And I would say 95% of the time, I write the quote of the day as I'm writing the email. So I'm not really pulling from any other sources. It's just what's on my mind, what pops in. And I've had a lot of great discussions, conversations with people regarding my quotes that I put in the emails. So at a minimum, getting those quotes is something that a lot of people enjoy, right? So that being said, masterchim.com, go there. All right. Big Joe, about to finish that November challenge you tasked us with. How did that go on your end? Joe, it went very well with a hiccup, an admitted hiccup. So last week, now the challenge Joe's referring to is the challenge that I put out there. Ironically, I thought that, doing the No Shave November, unless you're doing it for charity as a fundraiser or something, like I just think it's pretty fucking pointless. It's ironic because I decided to grow my beard. I will say that one of the reasons I decided to grow my beard was to put some content out with the beard again. I've been using that animated head, for a lot of my my thumbnails and memes and stuff. And one of my kids asked me if that was me, and I said, yeah. And they said, all right, well, how come you don't have a beard? So it was like, all right, you know what? Let me grow my beard out and see what's going on. But the challenge, that being said, is I put it out earlier in the month. And I could probably, let me see if I can find this. I don't think it'll take long. Maybe not. Oh, Jesus. At one point in time, I will eventually get better at doing this. But it was not to be today. Yeah, I'm trying to share an image, but it's not letting me share an image. You know what? I'm not going to fuck around with this because my luck, I'll turn the fucking thing off by accident. But so basically, the November challenge was to do every day in November 100 bodyweight squats, 100 push-ups, and 100 sprawls. And I articulated a sprawl as being a burpee without a push-up and a jump, right? So hands on the floor, feet back, to a plank, back, and then standing up. And we're doing it every day. But the hiccup that I had was last week. I got a hit with a pretty gnarly cold, and was sleeping maybe 14 hours a day, and I had to get my strength up. So there were probably 3-4 days that I wasn't able to do it. So I'll be the first one to say, I'm a no excuses type of guy. But that challenge for me was really an offering to the people that were looking to do something in lieu of the, let's just not shave for a month that a lot of people were doing. So it went well. I still managed to lift. I still managed to do jujitsu. I still managed to do my hiking, and stuff like that. So it was a component of the overall thing. But I have gotten a lot of feedback regarding the challenge, and it seemed to be pretty well received, and gave a lot of people a good kick in the ass to give them something to focus on from day to day. So that being said, I hope that it went well with you, Joe, and the rest of you guys that invested time in it. All right, so let me bring up. How are you guys liking the thumbnails, by the way? Give me some feedback on that. I've been messing with a new site and using some templates and customizing them to make these thumbnails a little bit more interesting. And sometimes, I'm having fun with these things, and it's not really producing any results. So I have to sort of fall out of love with these things. And at this point with these thumbnails, I'm having a lot of fun. I'll still make my memes and stuff. You guys, I've been doing that for years, and that's always been something that people have appreciated with the content that I put out. But the thumbnails specifically, give me some feedback on what you guys think about it. I'm prompting or queuing up the email that I sent out this morning. All right, regarding today's talk. Before I start that, also give a shout out to my son, my second born son, Kaizen, who turns 13 today. And Kaizen may wind up being the tallest Garcia in history. He's almost at his older brother's height already, and I'm sure it's not going to be long before he passes me. My oldest son, Hayden, is probably, he's got his dad's frame, so he's going to max out any day now on height. But Kaizen seems to be a fucking redwood in the making. So shout out to him. He's 13 today. After this, we have we're going to go out for a birthday lunch. Most of the time we go out to dinner, but they have wrestling practice today, so it is understood that there will be no missing practice for one's birthday. I would say one of the best ways to celebrate one's birthday is to go and practice a combat art. So they'll be doing that. My voice is a little less than 100% today too, so bear with me. I'm a little raspy. Got a little sultry thing going on today, but I've opted for Monsters instead of the cold, cough drops that have been helping me throughout the week. So all that being said, let's see what's popping here. Framing a man's mindset. That is the lead topic for today's Warrior Stream. Framing a man's mindset. As is the usual process, let's first talk about terms. So framing, when we say that we're going to frame something, a term that's used ambiguously by a lot of people today. But if we're looking at what the word actually means, we're talking about creating a sort of box, right? An enclosure within we are going to develop some idea, some concept. So framing a man's mindset, whatever we determine a man's mindset to be, during this conversation, through this conversation, we're trying to say, okay, well, how should we compartmentalize this, or how should we create some sort of modular, application of what this man's mindset is? How do we take it out of the ambiguous and make it a little bit more structured and formulaic, right? That happens to be how I enjoy and appreciate addressing these things. Take the nonsense, the fluff, the foofy, mystical, just double speak out of it and get down to almost, math. How are we looking at this? How do we measure it? What are the metrics? What direction are we looking to move in? And how do we get that done and hold ourselves accountable? Right? That's the approach I like to take when building a relationship with concepts like this. So framing speaks to that. So a man's mindset. So I'm not going to talk about what a man is. Do we have to? But the reason I say man's mindset is because this is different, from a woman's mindset. This is, I think the mindset of a man and the mindset of a woman have different functional roles. And I think a man benefits from understanding that there's a distinction to be made right off the bat where those two things are concerned. And it also allows him to invest in a way that will speak to him more deeply than if he were to limit himself to different approaches or even different mindsets specific to what we're talking about that could be universally applied to men and women alike. I think there are some extra ways to develop the mindset if specializing it beyond one's gender, specifically here, the man. And finally, mindset. So mindset is one of these ambiguous, for a lot of people, terms that, again, one of the problems, what's the problem with it being ambiguous? Why do we need to nail it down to a specific definition in the first place? And I would say consistency, like if we're saying what a mindset is, if we're saying mindset is the mood that we're in, or, the level of preparedness in something, the level of awareness in something, having the ability to think about something, like what people use the term mindset interchangeably. And I'll be the first one to say, like, I don't have the monopoly on what the definition is. But one of the things I will put out there is that my definition is how I use it in every application of the term, right? So mindset. I think of mindset, I define mindset as a mind setting, right? So if we look at the settings on let's just say a monitor, right? I have this big ass monitor in front of me. We look at the settings of a monitor. We understand that there are different aspects to the way that the monitor performs its job. And we basically customize what those settings are in different values to have the experience we want to have. That experience represents what our ideal experience would be given having, a monitor with one's computer, right? So I have a monitor. I want to have the perfect experience or the ideal experience with this monitor. So I go into the settings and I set them appropriately to allow that to happen. Now, the thing about the settings is it almost creates a sort of filter of experience. When we have these settings, and I'm going to continue to use the analogy of the monitor, when we place these settings, ideally, in a customized way according to our preferences, everything that is displayed on this monitor is displayed through those settings. So there is an inherent bias. There's also a filtered effect where there may be some things that don't come across. Maybe not at all, maybe not in their raw format, right? So when we now get to what the mindset is, it's really creating the settings that allow us to filter our experiences in a way that, again, follows the preferences of what our ideal experience would be. So when we have a mindset, one of the things that I'll use some phrases, some sayings to illustrate, how this could be modified. When we say look on the bright side, or, he's a glass is half full type of guy. That speaks to a part of the mindset of the individual, in that they're willing to spotlight or focus on the positive or productive aspects of their experiences, and not to be, and it should not be mixed in with those that are of the opposite perspective, the pessimists, the people who are skeptical to the point of dysfunction. Our settings of our mind are going to create a consistency in the causal relationship we have with our efforts. When we are somebody who tends to be, I had a conversation with one of my coaching students, I think it was last week, and he might even be watching. He's popped up before, and he was talking about buying some real estate in South America. There's a country down there that's becoming a pretty good, digital nomad hub, and a lot of expats and stuff. And it's becoming a good opportunity for people looking to buy some land and invest, abroad. And I told him that he would fare much better in that environment than I would. And how I articulated that was that because of my mindset, my presentation, and the sort of energy that I put out there, I would trigger people's reactions more consistently than he would. He is a very smart, very accomplished, hardworking, solid dude. Good family man. He's also very easygoing. He has very cultured, well traveled, has been around the block, so to speak. And part of his energy is, he's very easygoing, and he has a lot of alliances, and he does well in business because of those, that temperament that he has. Whereas I do not have that temperament. Now, I think I'm a nice guy. I think I'm pretty easygoing with people I guess I can go easily with, right? So I think that's a good way to look at it. But I am somebody who's also, I have a mindset that keeps me connected, plugged in to different aspects of my experience that is going to change the energy that I'm putting out. And I would more likely be an anomaly in a place like that than he would. It's not to say that I would be dysfunctional, but we would have different effects on our ecosystem depending on the temperament that we have, that is really driven by our mindset, right? What type of filter are we putting on our experiences? How are we interpreting it? And what is the relationship that we're building as a result? Right. So that being said, I think that names the terms properly, right? Framing a man's mindset. So I created a list of sort of subtopics to help flesh this out and look at practical applications of why framing one's mindset as a man is even necessary, or even has any sort of inherent value, right? And the first question that I posed to sort of start this is, why do weak men pretend to be strong? Why do weak men pretend to be strong? One of the things that you'll notice about weak men, again, terms being what they are, men who reject exposing themselves to a process of improving upon their deficiencies, climbing the ladder, is the analogy, the metaphor that I use. So weak men are people who are either those who reject that process altogether. They're the naysayers, the haters, the people who everything's, very almost nihilistic. Nothing's worth anything. And it's just it's a very fragile mindset, because it's really this great narrative that people create just to not take any risk, because they're risk averse, or they're scared of failing. And you'll have these individuals who are weak, but they pretend to be strong. And the reason they pretend to be strong is because they do understand, they identify that people who are strong tend to have some of the results, the consequences that they themselves are looking for. Now, they may reject the process to get them, as I just explained, or they may have never just exposed themselves to enough of the process to be able to understand how to get these, these results that the strong men are getting. I'm going to actually jump to a different question here because I think it's relevant here. But what's the difference between strength and power? So when I say weak men pretend to be strong, I think strength, I don't want to define it without getting into the distinction I planned on making anyway, right? So let's take a little aside for a second and talk about strength versus power. Now, strength is the ability to move in one's environment against resistance. Okay? Strength is the ability to move in one's environment against resistance. We literally could say somebody is strong when they can lift heavy weights. Why? Because the weights represent a relationship with that mass and the gravitational pull of the earth. And somebody who can lift these weights is being able to generate enough force to counter or exceed what that is. And we say how much of that they can do speaks to their physical strength, right? So the ability to move, or move within one's environment against resistance is also, metaphorically used and applied when looking at strong individuals who are able to control their surroundings and their ecosystem, right? So the distinction that I make with power is, and I concede this could very well be dismissed by an individual as a sort of semantic dilemma, but I am saying this is the articulation or the distinction that I'm using to make between these two terms, again, for consistency's sake. So when one is powerful, it's not that they can control the surroundings. When one is powerful, it's that they can maintain their identity despite the surroundings. Okay? So that's the distinction I make. Strength is the ability to control the ecosystem. Power, or being powerful, is the ability to maintain the integrity of our identity despite the ecosystem that we're exposed to, right? So using that distinction and bringing it back now to this first question of why do weak men pretend to be strong is because they see the only way to protect themselves as being controlling the environment, right? And that's the rub right there. That's the dilemma that a lot of men fall into when their mindset is not appropriately set. So a framing technique or application that we have right now is a man should understand the difference between controlling the environment around him and maintaining the integrity of his identity despite the environment. So somebody from the outside who has never gone through this process, they don't understand that distinction. They don't understand that, well, this guy seems to have his shit together. This guy seems to have a life worth living. He seems to be, basically, going about life the way that I want to go about life. When they're on the outside observing it, they only get a superficial snapshot of what is actually happening. So they interpret the causal relationship that individual that they're looking at, they interpret that as being, well, this guy's really strong. This guy's able to move stuff. This guy's able to control his environment. And they think that that is how this person lives the life or has the type of life that they, want to have themselves. So this is why weak men pretend to be strong. It is not too far off from the what is the cargo cult phenomenon. So very quickly, the cargo cult phenomenon is post-World War II, Pacific Islands, indigenous peoples during the course of the war were able to observe Allied forces and these temporary bases that were put up and these cargo planes that were dropping cargo on these makeshift bases temporarily. When the war ended and these Allied forces left, they found that a lot of indigenous peoples, and I'm skimming the surface of the story, obviously, but a lot of indigenous peoples were actually trying to reinvent that, cargo plane dropping because this airstrip looked this way. They looked at it almost like the people who were there were almost like magicians, like sorcerers. And when they left, they tried with straw to make these I guess, makeshift landing strips and towers and everything, because they thought if they could reinvent or reproduce this snapshot of what they saw, that a plane would drive by and drop a bunch of supplies on them, right? So these cargo cults was a testament to that. Now, when I make the connection of that phenomenon to weak men pretending to be strong, you'll see a lot of the fraudulent reproduction of things that they've observed. But they've observed it from the outside so far away from what was actually occurring that it's only a snapshot, a superficial understanding of what is transpiring that they're trying to reproduce, right? So why do weak men pretend to be strong? Because they think that men who are strong are simply strong because they're able to control their surroundings. They don't add any credence, any value to the internal processes that strong men often have, which is a high level of power, right? Or the ability to maintain the integrity of their identity despite the ecosystem they're in, right? So I remember, I'll give you an example. Yarn Saxa, what's up, dog? Good to see you. I remember being in a situation. This is going to make me sound really cool, but it really wasn't. But it's the first thing that popped in my head. Being locked up, and I was a teenager. I think I was 16 at the time when I was locked up, and during a rec time after lunch, I was playing basketball, and when I was playing basketball, I remember somebody calling me a name or calling me something, whatever. And it was an insult that if I just, rolled with, and maybe if I had a little bit more, nuance to, to handling these situations like I do now, I would have other alternatives. But at the time, I couldn't allow this guy to call me this thing in front of this crew. Now, I was a capable teenager, but it's not like I was some jujitsu black belt back then. I was aggressive, I was physical, I was strong for a teenager. But point being, I had no assurances that I'd be able to beat anybody in a fight that I was going to have a fight with. But I had to be ready to fight because that was just the law of the land. So upon getting insulted, I threw the basketball at the guy's head and basically was like, say that shit again. I don't remember exactly what I said, but that was the gist of it. And when I did it, I didn't know if I was going to get my ass kicked, if I was going to get jumped, if I was going to get stabbed. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I just knew that I couldn't abide by being treated like that because that would inform how everybody would treat me from there on in. And it was a test in that sense. And I would like to think that at that point, I did not have a lot of strength, but I had a functional level of power. I had the wherewithal to expose myself to potential risk, knowing that, well, that's how it's going to be because I'm not going to allow myself to live the alternative ways that not doing something would subject me to, right? So we don't want to pretend to be strong if we're weak because we don't understand what goes along with the mindset of somebody who has control over the environment. I would say a lot of times, and we could observe this in this aquarium these days in society, you have people who are not powerful individually, but are given a lot of strength artificially, and they become tyrannical. They become dysfunctional. We see this in urban environments. We really see it everywhere. I'm a little biased thinking about the environment I grew up in, but you got a lot of people who, you'll have a kid who's a bitch, who's weak, who is scared of everything, who has no loyalty to anybody but himself, like a scavenger. But if he gets a gun, a pistol, this is me growing up in the 80s, 90s Bronx, if he's the one that has a gun, he's got some influence over his ecosystem, and people have to respect that influence. But because he doesn't have the building blocks of what it takes, to build up his character, to eventually develop a powerful, character, he winds up getting himself in trouble more often than not. He's basically a spoiled child, right? And that's what you'll get a lot of when you have weak people who are given strength or control over their environment. You wind up seeing their tantrums played out, in dysfunctional behaviors, right? So it doesn't necessarily help the individual who's weak to be given strength, or to be given the respect of somebody who has strength, because usually the process of building strength is what gives somebody the ability and the perspective to actually be able to wield it functionally, right? So let's get to the next one. Why do powerful men fare better than others? I don't think, given the explanation that I just shared, I don't think it's that much of a mystery. Powerful men fare better than others because, despite what is happening in their ecosystem, they have an understanding, a functional understanding of who they are. They do not become confused. They do not start to conflate what their mission and their standards, their codes are as an individual when they are powerful. So when you are not rattled by the peaks and valleys of life, you tend to be able to maintain a level of orientation to where you can see through the obstacles that lie in front of you. When you have somebody who is unsure of themselves, right, to just draw a contrast, when somebody is unsure of themselves, there's a certain amount of resistance that will be presented to that individual, where they will begin to question their very mission as an individual, right? I remember this story that was very funny. It's still a funny story to me, but not the best story for the individual's reputation. But I remember an old jujitsu guy, a buddy of mine, older guy at the time. He was probably in his 60s, and I was in my early 30s. At the time of this story, he was telling a bunch of us that he had gone on a date, I don't know if it was a dating app or he was set up on a date or something, but he was on this like blind date with this woman, and he goes to brought her to a bar, like a bar restaurant, whatever. Go to the bar, get a drink. I don't fucking know. He's sitting at a bar with this blind date, and they sit down and they start to order drinks, and the guy's telling the story that this big guy comes over, and but my buddy is a jiu-jitsu guy, but he's in his 60s, and in the story you understood there was no understanding that he could handle himself against this guy that winds up entering into the picture here. And the guy comes up to the young lady who's sitting in the chair, or the lady, the blind date of my friend, and goes, "Hey, you're sitting in my chair. Like, that's my chair. You're gonna have to get out or get up." And the lady looks to my friend, her blind date. And my friend who's telling the story says he looks at the girl, he looks at the guy, he looks the guy up and down, and he looks back at the girl and goes, "Well, you're sitting in his fucking seat. Get out of his fucking seat." And she storms off, and the date winds up ending miserably. Well, this is one of the reasons why powerful men fare better. This guy in this individual circumstance did not have such a powerful understanding of what was at play here, um, that a little bit of resistance uh, basically had him just cut and run. Like, no, 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 I can't survive this level of conflict. There is no, let me try and navigate through this. It's like, nope, just bail, retreat, right? And that's why powerful men tend to fare better than others, because they understand who they are, what they're about. They don't allow their circumstances to dictate to them who they're supposed to be. It's no, I know what I stand for. I know what I'm going to do. Like, I have had, I've talked about it plenty of times. I've had plenty of fights, physical altercations, two people who clenched fist and, swung them at somebody else's face. Like, I've been in a lot of those. And I'd be lying if I said I was confident in all of them. Then I will admit there were times where I was a fucking hothead and I was just being completely irresponsible. But there are other times where I fought, where I by my standards, I had to fight. And it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I knew the consequences or the alternatives were even less, acceptable. And I had to do it. There are times where, one of the reasons why I criticize people who kill themselves, and I don't mean people who sacrifice themselves, people who kill themselves, right? Let's make that distinction. It's that when you hear this person kills himself and they have a wife and kids, like, there's a certain point where the identity of being a father, of being a husband, as being a provider and a protector, started to be overcome by the narrative of victimization, the narrative that led them to eventually quit. It's why I'm so critical, because they hadn't even developed the power on an individual level to understand that they are a father and a protector and a provider first, and what the experiences that they're having at the same time that could potentially lead to this disassociation or depression or other, just, dysfunctional mindset. Like, they allowed that to happen because chances are it happened to a certain level before they had any ability to invest in stopping it. Like, I know first and foremost, there are things that I will not do because of who I am. And I would say that the power that I get out of that gives me a great amount of clarity when it comes to what it is I should be doing, what it is that I should be investing my energy in as an individual, right? So why do powerful men tend to fare better than others? I would say because they understand who they are despite the ecosystem, whereas people who are not powerful, who are lower on the scale, the spectrum of self-power, at a certain point, they will have dictated to them by their ecosystem who they are and who they're supposed to be. And usually in those cases, and maybe this is somewhat ironic, it's self-preservation right up to the point where it's just, almost they're looking to opt out, right? So it's an interesting dynamic that plays itself out. But how do you inoculate yourself from the entire thing? It's you build your power, right? You learn who you are, you have a code, you have a set of standards, and you allow that to trump and prioritize the investment of your efforts, right? Corey says, what's up? Corey says, it's always satisfying to see betas get chewed up, and spit out when they actually have to fit in an environment with stronger men. It really doesn't pay to fake it. And I think this is actually a good segue into one of the other things I wanted to discuss, which is healing versus fixing. Now, I think when an individual, when a man in this case, has a deficiency that he himself identifies, he does himself a disservice when he labels and categorizes that deficiency as some aspect of him being a broken man. You see, when you look at these deficiencies in a way that you think you're not supposed to acknowledge them to people around you, you create the connotation that you are somehow at flaw, right? Somehow at fault, rather, in that you're in a state of being broken, and you look to mask that from the people around you. Well, here's the thing. There is not a man on the planet who is perfect. There's not a man on the planet who does not have deficiencies. Even if you wanted to, hypothetically create this standard of a perfect man, even that man, during the course of his life, will develop different directions in which he's moving, each one representing potential deficiencies because of its newness, if for no other reason. So it's sort of like, I'm a black belt in jujitsu. If I were to go to a karate class, I would put on a white belt. So let's say that I was the perfect jujitsu practitioner, and believe me, I'm not. But if I were, that doesn't speak to the deficiencies I would have if I now went on a karate journey. So just movement alone will preserve a amount of deficiency in an individual, which means it is a natural thing for a man to have, right? So when we look to mask those things, when we look to pretend, what we wind up doing is we're saying that those deficiencies are weaknesses. Those deficiencies speak to the, just the lower level of status that we deserve as men. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It's not, and it's not even, I have a better way to look at it than that way. No, it is literally inaccurate. When you are broken, acknowledging deficiencies now have you need to make the concession that you need to be fixed. I would much rather advocate for a relationship with this state that men acknowledge their deficiencies as wounds that they may accumulate, and these wounds need to be healed. It's not about fixing a broken man. It's about healing a wounded man. By the way, if you are worth a shit as a man, you will expose yourself on a regular basis to the type of adversity and conflict and unknown obstacles that will produce wounds, that will produce trauma, that will produce, injury at times. But when that occurs, understand first and foremost, it is a testament to a man moving forward that he has those wounds. And to resolve and alleviate those wounds is not to fix the man, it's to heal him. And part of that healing process is he is always stronger than when he began. When you fix something that is broken, you imply that it is at a sub-functional level and it needs to be fixed so that it returns to its functional level. That is not the process that happens to a man who exposes himself to conflict, to trauma, to the unknown obstacles of a life well lived. The process that speaks to the reaction to those exposures is a healing one. And at the end of it, it is synergistic in that at the end of it, a man is more than when he started. And that is what an individual needs to understand. A man needs to understand when looking at the difference between healing and fixing. Broken people, sure, they need to be fixed, but don't consider yourself to be broken just because you have some healing to do. If you're an individual who was, I'm going to go right for the jugular here. If you're a man who was abused as a child, molested as a child, physically abused as a child, there's a certain point where you can consider yourself to be capable of healing wounds that other men haven't had. But at the tail end of that, you will not only be a functional man, but you will be a functional man with the understanding of certain aspects of life that other men are never exposed to in the first place. You will have a more nuanced and developed relationship with what struggle, pain, and all these other challenging elements of life can do to a man. You will be more valuable because of it. I know so many men, and even me to a certain extent. I wasn't abused as a child. I'd be misrepresenting myself if I didn't articulate that. But I've been through levels of adversity that at the time were not comfortable. But I will say at this point in my life, I am grateful for having had the opportunity to heal from the wounds that I've accumulated over the years, because it makes me more valuable as a man. It adds more depth to my relationship with my life, with the capabilities I have to help those around me. The only thing that is going to add to that value is when looking at the cumulative effect of healing from the wounds that I've collected over the years. And that's the process. I've never been a broken man, but I've had as many wounds as the next person, and I've had to heal them, and I am better off for it. So we're looking at, framing a man's mindset. This is what we're talking about. How is it that you are interpreting these experiences as a man? Well, what is it that you're trying to get to? What is your mission? What is the standard? What is it that you are trying to have your life move toward? Your mind should be set in a way that your experiences fuel a movement toward it. It needs to be congruent. You can't be the guy that's talking about, I'm a strong man, I'm this, I'm that, and you're on your fourth marriage and you have, 5 kids with 5 different women, and you're spending the lion's share of your earnings on jewelry, and you think that money's, you're so shallow and really just immature that you think money's going to solve all of these character deficiencies that you have. You can't be that person and expect to be taken seriously by the universe. I don't think that, and Alan Watts has a great quote, and I don't mean it's to use the phrase taken seriously, literally. Alan Watts says, one shouldn't take themselves seriously. One should take themselves sincerely, and it's in sincerity is what I'm really commenting on here. You can't be a man who is fighting harder to build the mask than he is the man. Because who is it that you are, displaying yourself to? And how is it that you will ever be disconnected from who the audience is if every aspect of who you are was developed in response to the feedback that they've given you? Right? Hope I'm making sense here. Let me get to some of these comments. Joran Saxa writes, I just wrote something this morning about, by the way, those of you that want to get a book worth reading, I just started. I haven't finished it. But Beneath the Sacred Tree by my man, Brian Wilton. Check that out. Should be finishing it by the end of the day. Sorry, but that was a little side message there. But let me get to this again. I just wrote something this morning about faking it or putting on a facade. People not being authentic. When you wear that many masks, you start to not know who you are, a man or a woman. Absolutely right. And I would say, it's funny to add another level to it. Not only do you not know who you are, there's an argument against claiming to be anybody in the first place, because you haven't actually developed the anchor to which these different personas are connected. If there is no common anchor that you could identify, then, well, you got a problem, because you're walking around being a shadow, and you're always going to be, your efforts are always going to be directed in whatever way the people around you tell you to. How are you supposed to amass any sort of individual, process of personal power and development if you have every stranger, every disconnected identity at the helm? Johan continues, if you have to be one person online and another person and another in person and another at work, you start to lose track of your intrinsic self. Absolutely right. And I will say, shout out to my buddy Daryl, longtime follower of the podcast, and participates in a lot of my content. I remember meeting Daryl a couple of years ago for the first time in person, and I even wrote about this in one of the emails. It was the best compliment I had ever gotten by my criteria. He said, after meeting me, he's like, man, you're the same person in person that you are online and in the emails. And that is feedback from my experiences that tell me I'm doing it right. Because I exist first, and everything that I connect to as me. And that's the priority in which I deal with that. Doesn't always get me along, have me get along with the people around me. Some alliances aren't sustainable because of the offsets that are discovered after spending a certain amount of time and energy with other people. But it's non-negotiable for me. I'm not going to lose who I am, right? And I think that when you have an individual who feels the need to be somebody else in significant portions of their day, in front of consistently engaged other crowds, like, it's a problem. It's going to start drawing a wedge in the relationship you have with yourself, right? Judge Cone, what's up, brother man? What's up, Will? Yarn says, responding to Corey, I call them mimics. They just mirror their own emotions, likes and dislikes at you. They don't know how to be honest with themselves, how they can be honest if they don't know who they are. Absolutely right. I love the term mimic. There was actually I think that's the name of the movie. I've referenced it before. And it's a sci-fi movie. I think it was made in like the early 2000s. And it's about like this, I don't know if it was a science experiment or alien ooze or one of those fucking plot lines. But basically, there was an insect species that was exposed to something, and it sort of it sped up, accelerated its evolution to the point where it, like 2 weeks after, it had evolved into being able to mimic a man standing on a subway platform, right? So that was its ecosystem. It evolved to sort of mimic looking like a guy at night standing on a subway platform, and that became how it hunted people. And it was only mimicking, what it saw to fit into the environment, but it was like a killer bug or some shit like that. And I think the name of it was Mimic. And it's just, to me, it's like the great example of what mimicry is. It's like, even if somebody is pretending to be overlapped with you, there's a certain depth of relationship you need to have with an individual before you could sign off and say, yeah, he's not a bug. He's not a killer bug. He's somebody who is legitimate and authentic, which speaks to the rituals that create further overlap and alliances. And, a lot of my content addresses that. But it's consistent in that sense. When you have somebody who's just trying to mimic, there's a certain point where, you're only going to fool people for so long. There are men going around thinking they're women, and they're doing their hardest to mimic it. And you know what? Some of them mimic it better than others, but it's still mimicry, right? And there's still a certain level of, there's a limitation to the depth at which they could fool, I guess, the people they interact with, right? And I think that's a good comparison there. Joe with the Musashi quote. You could always, get on the screen with a Musashi quote. Think lightly of yourself, but deeply of the world. Oh, so good. So good. I just recommended the Book of Five Rings to somebody a couple of days ago. Sean, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Captain Paduff. Podduff? I'll call you Captain. What's up, Captain? All right. Captain says, I'm in class right now. You are mute. Could you hire some proficient in warrior sign language? Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I wonder if this is the limitation of my my YouTube knowledge, but I wonder if like even captions are possible if you put them on mute, if that even happens. Somebody tell me, does that happen if you put on captions? Like, will it just start generating captions? Because it depends. I've had, a love-hate relationship with captions. When I'm really getting fired up and the Bronx starts to come out, it starts looking like I'm speaking gibberish, when a lot of AIs start to try and create captions. But it's something that I'm always curious about. All right, I got a couple of minutes left. Let me finish up by saying, those of you that participated in the Power Weekend sale that I had for the Warrior Project, much gratitude to you. I appreciate you guys investing in me and becoming a part of that. It is closed now. If any of you, and I'm just putting this out at the end of my live show, if any of you guys are still interested in joining my membership site for $120 for the year instead of $497, send me a message. Send me a message. You could send a message to info@masterchim.com. That one works. Send it there, and I will send you a link so that you could join for the 120. But I'm not putting it out anywhere else on social media because it's closed. But that'll be a treat for you guys that are still watching at the end of this. MasterChim.com. Make sure you guys are getting my emails every day. I'm always pushing that. Tell your friends about it. These videos, I love making them. When I'm writing the emails, I'm a little bit more balanced. I'm not on camera. I love being on camera, but a little bit more, organized presentation of a lot of my thoughts in the email. So definitely get connected to that. Jesse says the caption option is grayed out for me on mobile. Yep. The AI is not fucking with me. AI is going, I don't know what the fuck that guy's saying. But guys and girls, I appreciate you all for spending some time with me. I hope you got something out of today. You guys know I enjoy doing this, and I appreciate you guys spending the time with me as I do it. MasterChim.com. I'm here every week, noon Eastern Standard Time. Time to go have one of my son's birthday lunches before wrestling practice. But I appreciate you all, and I will see you next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.